Welcome back to the channel, and today we're going to be taking a look at how to protect yourself from rejected warranty claims when it comes to motherboards. So you may have seen videos floating around specifically with Gamers Nexus when it comes to warranties and how shady some of these companies can be. So I decided to put together a video on how you can protect yourself by videoing yourself opening your motherboard, examining it for damage, and immediately showing in the video if you see any damage. I also go over how to bench test so that you can video yourself bench testing your motherboard right after you open it. That way the manufacturer has no way that they can say no, because they can actually visually see you opening the motherboard, how you treat it, and your examination process of finding any damage that might be on your motherboard. And you get to see if your motherboard is actually working or if it did come dead on arrival. So it's a win-win for you. I always wear electrostatic discharge protection when I'm doing these types of things, and I'm going to have it around my ankle attached to a power supply body that's metal that is then plugged into my house. So I am going to be grounded through my home, and I would definitely recommend showing that on video as you are unpackaging your motherboard. That way the company cannot come back and say, well, you weren't wearing electrostatic discharge protection. So you might not see this in my video, but I would 100% point that out in any video that you create in preparation for a potential warranty claim. So if you have a camera or a phone, go ahead and set it up so that you can see the motherboard in the way that I'm going to show you right now. So as discussed, the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to open up the motherboard on camera and show that we haven't opened this prior, and we can go ahead and lift the lid. Now there's no tape or anything closing this box. However, we do have the motherboard in electrostatic discharge protectant bag here. And again, I have my ankle connected to my electrostatic discharge band that is connected to a power supply that is connected to my home's power system. So I'm grounded through my house. So it might be a little bit overkill, but that's how I like to do things when I'm working with electronics. So we can go ahead and pull this board out of packaging. Now that we got the motherboard out of the box on camera, showing that it has not been opened yet, we can go ahead and break open this bag here so that we can start to inspect the motherboard. I'm going to go ahead and cut over here on the back side near the I/O panel. That way we're not near any of the components on the actual motherboard. Now that we got that, we can go ahead and just open this up. And now that we have the motherboard completely unpackaged, we can go ahead and look at the motherboard. We can check all of these capacitors, make sure they look nice and straight, that none of them are bent. We're going to go ahead and inspect all the pins on these external plugs right here along the bottom. Over here on the sides, we can look at the CPU fan plugs right here, and we can turn the board over, make sure we don't see anything on the back side that is concerning. To me, everything is looking quite good with this motherboard as expected. Now you can also look down inside of these DIMM slots right here. This is where your RAM plugs in, and make sure that you don't see any of the bent pins or anything that might cause your RAM to have issues plugging in. Now this also comes with a easy latch for the PCI Express. Make sure that works. We can see down here, see if this one is working appropriately as well. That one looks good. So everything is looking good on this motherboard so far. Now we do have a heatsink here that we can take off, which I am going to do so that I can look at the M.2 drive slots that are sitting underneath of here. Okay, so now that we've gotten the heatsink taken off, we can go ahead and make sure that the M.2 slots look good. There's no bent pins or any kind of protruding metal that shouldn't be there. We can take a look down inside of the PCI slots as well, looking for the same thing. If you don't see anything out of the ordinary, that's okay. We are going to actually power this on and test this. So We might uncover some issues later, but typically it should be pretty easy to spot these bent pins, bent capacitors, or anything inside of here that looks potentially problematic. It'll stick out pretty easily for you to tell. So next, you can also go ahead and take a look inside of your I/O panel. Make sure you check for any problematic situations with the back I/O panel. Again, just look for broken or missing connections that you think could cause issues. So I'm also going to turn the motherboard on its side so that I can look at these side plugs right here. I don't see any kind of issues with these, which is great. And that's really all there is going to be to looking at this motherboard visually, outside of taking off the CPU socket cover. We're going to do that by pushing down and over on this arm, and we'll pull that back, and we can just lift this up. And that's going to reveal your CPU socket. Now, some older motherboards have the CPU pins on the actual CPU. On most modern motherboards, you're going to have a land grid array, which is going to give you pins on the actual motherboard versus on the bottom of the CPU. So what you want to do is take a quick look at all of these pins and make sure that you don't see any that are bent or potentially missing. I know you might not know what a missing pin looks like, but if there is one missing out of the center, it's going to be pretty obvious and you'll be able to tell. And if you find something like that, point it out in the video that you're recording for your warranty protection purposes, so that when you do show that to the manufacturer, you can very clearly show that you opened this one time and immediately found a broken or missing pin, and that it was not your fault, and that it was an issue with the manufacturing of this motherboard. Same thing with any of these other components. If you do see something that is broken or missing or bent, immediately point that out in your video so that you can take that to the manufacturer and they will essentially have no excuse but to replace it, since you showed yourself unpackaging the motherboard from factory and immediately doing a visual inspection and noticing that damage. So this is a great way to protect yourself from potential failed warranty claims. And we're going to take this a bit further so that we can actually test these components on camera. So we have the AMD Ryzen 5 7600 that I am going to go ahead and put in the CPU socket here. Now there's a little arrow on this corner of the CPU, and there's an arrow up here, and that's how you know what corner to put it in, as well as some different notchings on the actual socket itself. And it's just going to lay in there nice and easy. You don't have to press or do anything like that. You just set it there, and then you can go ahead and remove this top and go ahead, set that down and close that up just like that. Now your CPU is installed. We can go ahead and install the RAM. The RAM is now installed, and notice I'm doing this without power to the board. That's an important thing to note, is you do not want to have power plugged into the motherboard while you are doing any of this. And again, I am grounded around my ankle to a power supply into my home. So to install the cooler here, I'm going to have to take these black braces off that allow you to install retention clamps or clips or other coolers, as this is going to go straight into the motherboard itself. And this is the cooler, and as you can see, it already has some thermal paste applied to it from the factory. There's no plastic on the bottom of it, so we can go ahead and install this onto our CPU. We're gonna have to put it this way so we can clear the RAM. And I'm gonna go in a crisscross pattern here so that I can get pretty even tension on this system, so that we get an even pressure across the CPU for the testing purposes. We have CPU installed, we have RAM installed. This RAM also has RGB on top, so we should be able to see if this powers on when we turn the system on. I'm going to plug the HDMI cable that goes to my monitor into the IO panel here so we can use the onboard graphics to see the screen. So we have power installed, and we got to plug in our CPU power as well. I went ahead and took a look at the motherboard manual just to make sure we have everything set up correctly. And it says to put the RAM in A2 and B2, so I went ahead and changed that. Now we can go ahead and boot this motherboard up for the first time to see if we have any issues with posting or getting to the BIOS. So I'm going to go ahead and turn the power supply on, and I'm going to boot it up. Okay, let me turn the monitor on, and we got ourselves a splash screen here. We can go ahead and hit end real quick. And we are in the BIOS. We can see our RAM down here. We have our CPU going. CPU temperature looks good. It's recognizing everything. So this motherboard is good to go. So as I said, videoing yourself, opening your motherboard, examining it for damage. That way you can submit that as evidence if you do come across a motherboard that is DOA. You can take it a step further and test the PCI Express slot with a GPU. It's super simple. I didn't explore that as the video was already getting long enough, but it's as simple as plugging a GPU in, putting power, and plugging in your monitor cable into that. And if you get an image, it's all good. So you can go ahead and do that as well if you would like. But this process is going to help you with your evidence if you do in fact have an issue with your motherboard. Best of luck to you if you do have a warranty claim for a DOA board. And I hope that they approve it, and I hope that this video helped you to gather the evidence that you needed to submit that warranty claim. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.